We're just getting started with the annual meeting overview that our council member Kendall is going to go over.
I'm Kendall. I am a council member here in my second year of a 3-year term, and I am the head of governance and marketing for the org right now. So I just want to run us through a couple of annual meeting overview things that maybe we don't remember as members, that the annual meeting and other meetings of the membership are a right and a privilege that members have in being a co-op member. So according to the bylaws, you can see up here that the annual meeting is something that is required by the bylaws to happen every year in Kingston, at an appropriate place, this year at the African Burial Ground. So thank you to Harambe for that, for hosting us this year. And it is required to happen within 6 months after the close of each fiscal year. So all of the powers of the co-op originate from the members of the co-op, and members have the chance to make decisions in meetings such as this one. This year, we don't have anything to vote on, so there will be no elections, but with this meeting, members have the authority to make recommendations to the council and management, to give their direction and let us know as directors what you would like to see in your organization, in your store, in your business. So a few of the things are here. I don't need to run through all of them, but I do encourage everyone to take a look at the bylaws and know what your rights are as members, and to get active and participate, because this is your business and we are just here to support you and see through the work of your organization. So, as you know, we're not making any decisions, so the quorum thing isn't relevant today. We'll just be taking recommendations and not making any decisions. But in order for members to make any decisions, if you all wanted to call a meeting of the membership, there need to be 50 members here in order to vote on any decisions. But we can go now into the agenda for today.
Kendall just wrapped up the opening and overview. I'll be doing an annual report recap, which just kind of touches on major things from 2023. We'll dive into what probably all of our members want to know more about, which is the old location conversation. And then we'll go into a video slash speech from JQ, who is from FCI, Food Co-op Initiative. And it relates to the old location conversation. Then we'll talk about focus groups. We'll have an open forum for any of your questions or comments, and anybody online too, feel free to drop your questions as they come along and we'll address them in the open forum. Then we'll have closing remarks, focus group signups, and then hopefully the sun comes out a little bit and we can take a little walk through the burial ground. They have some new signage there, so that should be really nice. This year, January through April, we were working heavily towards our building at 708 Broadway. We were working with Mass Design Group. We held a schematic design showcase in February, and that was on Cedar Street at CCE. I'm wondering if some of you guys got to go there, but that was a cool event. We also brought on Victoria, who was our capital project manager, and she was pretty much hired to work with the owner's rep. She was all about the capital project. We also updated our bylaws at that time. We had some transitions on to the council in that time as well. Sway transitioned to finance chair. At that time, we were also holding office hours at the Broadway bubble. We finalized our pro forma, which was really important for the building and the co-op going forward. And then I also got onboarded onto the council in that time. Last annual meeting, I got elected by the membership to be a council member, but more on that in a second. Then we kind of hit a wall, I guess you could say. We called this period from April 2023 to August 2023 pause and evaluation, and in that time we did a number of focus groups with different stakeholders in the community. So Victoria, myself, Kendall, I think Kevius, and some other folks, we went around to different organizations and businesses on Broadway and in Midtown. We had the same schematic design info, and we were getting feedback like, what do you guys think of this? We had a lot of issues with codes and building things, so we were trying to get like community support to bring this info to the right people so that we could get it approved, because it was a challenge with the building. And we also, in the midst of that, we're doing some community gardening at South Pine Street City Farm. As I just touched on, those challenges that we were having with the building and codes and permits and all of that, we had developed a more regular working relationship with NoVo with the NoVo Foundation. They're capital and what's the word I'm looking for? There are grant funders for the capital project and for operation. So we had more meetings and discussions. We brought them in on these important conversations related to the challenges with the building. And ultimately, in this time between April and August, we transferred the capital project contracts to NoVo. And I don't know if you want to talk on this, or if we'll get to it later. But okay, we'll get to it later. In that period, we did decide that we had to step away from the 708 Broadway building, and we put the capital project on pause. And Kevius is going to go into more detail with that in just a moment. And then during the last quarter, we were focusing more on bringing additional support and food to members and the community. So we, for lack of a better word, we hit a wall with the capital project. We had to put it on pause. And the thought was, okay, how do we engage in getting people, our members, our community members, local food, despite not having a physical building for the foreseeable future, or for right now? We don't have a space. So how can we still help people get access to local and affordable food? So we were trying to figure out how we could do a market, which is also very challenging because it's very involved. So we ended up doing kind of a CSA style food distribution thing. We call them nourishment boxes. And through the nourishment boxes, I think the 2 or 3 rounds we did them, we had a total of 96 boxes that went out to members and community members via purchase. They were between, I think, $8 and like $40. So there was a sliding scale depending on what price point you select, and that was to encourage access, inclusivity, and really give members power to decide what they want to pay for their food. And we had 19 volunteers in that time as well, which was really awesome. Kevius and Kendall attended the FCI Up and Coming conference, which is where JQ, who you'll meet in a little bit via video, was at that conference as well. And it was a startup for all different co-ops across the country. And we also, in that time, the last quarter of 2023, we applied for a grant in partnership with Kingston Farmers Market to potentially offer them at the farmers market in the next year or two. And we also had we got an office at 369 Washington Avenue. And then also important, but not on the PowerPoint, is that in that time, I was no longer on the council because of it's complicated, I guess, but yeah, it's not mentioned, and we never actually said it to the membership, but I feel like it should be said because the membership did elect, you guys elected me to be on board and to be part of the leadership, and so I just felt like it was important to mention as well. But yeah, I'm just staff right now, and yeah, so there was a lot of changes in 2023. And I guess this is going right into the finance overview, and that would be Usway. So I'm gonna put the mic down for a second so that you can go over that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Siobhan. So for our 2023 finance overview, so this is information that is from January 2023 to December 2023. And all balances that are on here were reflective as of December 31st, 2023. So grants received from NoVo, we received $871,332 in grants from NoVo. Our balances as of December 31st, 2023, in our checking account, $213,566.52. In our savings, $100,006.98. For our member equity, as of December 31st, it was $50,565.22. And in our GWI, which is our fiscal sponsor, we had $358,005 there. So our total net holdings as of December 31st, 2023 was $521,013.28. You can go to the next screen. Our expenses breakdown. So in 2023, we had a number of expenses. Our highest billed expenses in 2023 came from our capital project, which was, we spent $430,181.51. As far as governance, we spent $92,614.33. For operational expenses outside of governance was $42,046.47. For staffing, which is our employees, between salaries and benefits, we spent $99,462.60. Professional fees, we have $38,465.08. And for professional fees, that does include items like our lawyer, some of the consultants and so forth. For our programming went mainly this year, or in 2023, for the annual meeting that happened last year in April. And so the majority of the $2,613.22 was for that. Our GWI, so as part of our for being our fiscal sponsor, GWI does get a fee of $52,544. Now the fee, it's not that they get that amount, it's every single grant that we get, they get a percentage. And so for GWI, we paid them a fee of $52,544 for 2023. And then as far as membership reimbursements, as of December 31st, 2023, we reimbursed $16,091.50 as of, again, December 31st. So our total expenses for 2023 was $774,018.71.
The location and design challenges. So I think there are three primary reasons why we had to sort of reevaluate the whole capitals project and everything that we had. The first reason, which we'll get into, had to do with code. So we'll break that down in a section. The second reason was our budget. We had one budget that we were able to swing higher for, and then from that number, it increased dramatically to the degree that it was just too costly. And the third reason, which is to me the most important reason, is the delivery challenges that we were facing with getting trucks of the size that we needed to the site itself. And so for those three reasons altogether, with the design at the time, we decided to pause the capitals project at that location. And what ultimately led to leaving that location was because we honestly didn't really have the opportunity to go back and redesign and all of these things and rebudget it and everything. It just got to a point where the council at the time, and then also considering the fact that we're working with funders, kind of came across at a table. It was like, all right, let's take that location out of our mind and like try something fresh elsewhere. So it was just kind of like this agreement of like, all right, we'll move from this location. We've put a lot of money and energy towards this one design, and we'll see where we are. So during this section, we'll break down just very briefly and kind of overview level, and we can get into some nitty gritty during the questionnaire. Those three sections, and I encourage any of my current council members who's on the team, who's been a part of that process, to speak up. If you would like to add details in addition to any current members or ex-council members, feel free to add any details. A lot has been happening, a lot has been going on. So if we miss anything, this is a group effort. So during the time of our building, there was a lot that was happening on the government level in the introduction and at the time drafting of new foreign-based code in Kingston. And in the sort of like midst of our design process, we worked with some incredible folks in operations and cooperative development and determined that based on the programming that we've all agreed upon and the site itself, that we wanted an entrance through the parking lot. There were a lot of reasons. One, operationally, it was just a lot easier. It made more sense. Safety wise, we didn't want cars going up and down Broadway. And however, that means, those are still sort of like issues that we had to balance with the fact that Kingston was very much pushing forward a form-based code. During the time of our build, the draft that came out really necessitated or stated that for the Broadway locations that an entrance had to be on Broadway. And then later drafts emphasized a very beautiful sort of facade out front. Either way, our building needed a variance of some sort to make the parking lot through the entrance through the parking lot possible. And of course, outside of the different legal parameters, there were also personal ideas that people brought to the table and concerns that they had with things on Broadway or things not on Broadway. They were also balancing. Other code issues had to do with the lot itself. So we did not own the parking lot that we were in. That was owned by the Big Bubble. And the building is owned by NoVo, were to be transferred to us later. But the main issue that we had was where we had our windows, which I put here, the proximity to the lot line was an issue. That rubbed up against code, in addition to the amount of daylight that we would have gotten on the adjacent side of our building, where the entrance would have been. So those were two issues that we uncovered a bit later in the process. And so, yeah, those are our code challenges: the foreign-based code situation, the proximity to the light line of our windows, and the daylight issues.
So the lot line issue, because I think that was really the main issue, because I know the form-based code issue was an emphasis, it was not a requirement, and in the casual conversations that I was having with the zoning commission at the time, it was not a problem based on the excitement of the design being activated on Broadway, even though there wasn't an entrance, was not going to be a problem and was not going to require a variance. So the second one is really the issue, because that one was really sticky to get around, right? That you need 3 feet to have windows on a lot line. It's a fire issue. So it's not even, I don't think it was even a building code, it was really a fire safety issue. Yeah. So like you can't get around that one except for moving the lot line, right? So
which we advocated for.
Right, so
Yeah.
I think what you're saying here, and I want to state it, is that the owner of the property, which is NoVo, was not willing to adjust the lot line 1.5 feet to make way for the building to be used with windows as a co-op. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think I tried to allude to that without being as pointed, because
because you're in it, but I'm not. So I just wanted to state it.
Well, yeah, initially I would say, like, there fundamentally there wasn't like a primary reason why it couldn't necessarily have worked at that site. And when I started off, I was like, we just decided to come together. I was like, hey, let's not pursue the site. So I do think, as I was going earlier, like without that mutual agreement, it can't happen, right? Like without the council agreeing to what the folks who are funding agreeing to, it just simply can't happen. And during that process, these are where the issues around where the core of our disagreements were happening. And then, so yes, and then there was a few drafts of the Kingston Code, I believe 4 drafts that were released before the final one. I could be off on that, Kristen, correct me. And one had a table that specified that if you have a place of occupation or a commercial building on Broadway, you were to have the your entrance had to be on Broadway or adjacent or in between Broadway and the parking lot, if your parking lot is adjacent to Broadway. So there were drafts in the codes that brought up considerations for needing to be a variance if that part of the code made it. But of course, we didn't know because the code was officially released after we closed everything. So yeah, but yeah, you're right. Yeah, budget overruns. So going into pre-design, our capital project team projected a total cost of 12.7 million. And I want to prerequisite this, but there were a lot of still considerations that needed to go into the costs. NoVo to us, hey, we have about $8 million budget for this project. We looked at our market studies and we talked to some other incredible people. And also given the fact that just construction costs were increasing very drastically and unpredictably at the time, we basically were like, well, this is what we could do for 8 million, which you see in that first picture at the very top, or something around that range. And then based on our market study, actually, here are the options that are a bit more valuable. So our team worked, day and night a lot to develop 4 different building options, 4 different pro formas, and a pro forma basically is your financial statement telling you, all the costs associated with your project and looking at you all the way through, like just different projections into the year. So that's what a pro forma is. So our team produced, 4 different pro formas, 4 different projects, 4 different everything. We came back to the table and in close collaboration with just incredible contractors and community, we determined that the second option of the 4 options we developed. So we landed on building option number 2, which cost 12.7 million. It was great because NoVo said, yeah, let's do it. And this was during our pre-design process. So it was right before what's called a schematic design process, where you like dive into the building, uncover more of what's going on, and are able to update your costs. So when we got deep into that process, that cost escalated from 12.7 to 20.1. And that was cause for, all right, let's pause, let's look at it. And ultimately, I think it was more than NoVo was willing to chew out for the property, which, understandably. So yeah, that's the second core reason, the budget overrun. So the last one are our delivery challenges. So initially, if you can see on the bottom left picture, that was our original concept for how trucks, the largest size that we would need to go in and out of the building. So they would come down Elmendorf, make a left into our loading dock and come back out that way, or come up Elmendorf, make a right into the loading dock and come out that way. Ultimately, it was determined that that was infeasible, that projection was not accurate, according to another study done later in association with NoVo, where it was determined that in order for a truck to actually get to that location, 3 things would have had to happen. 1, they would have had to go over the existing sidewalk, which posed a major safety risk, or 2, trucks would have had to leave through Elmendorf, so going over the new bridge that is between our property and Elmendorf. However, that bridge would have needed reinforcement because it was far too weak for the trucks. And then the third thing that it would have had to do is, I already stated the big piece about going over the sidewalk, over the bridge. And then cutting into Elmendorf. Sorry, that was the third thing. So the implication of a truck going over that bridge, which means that it's going into the residential neighborhood that is on Elmendorf, and that just poses a lot of just concerns for people across the board as to whether or not that were okay. And then we talked to the grocery consultants about like, well, what if we limit the size of trucks that come in so that, it could still happen, it could still go. And there is a recommendation that we don't do that because we could cut ourselves off from a lot of produce. And then there's the other option, which is, set up offsite storage, but then you're talking about a whole nother infrastructure and a whole other logistics operation that needs to happen in addition to this one, which, as I said in the last line, was already over budget. So that would have been kind of an issue. And yeah, so those are 3 primary issues. There were some code issues, budget overruns, and delivery challenges. And I think we're gonna jump into just talking about that. Any questions, comments, concerns?
I had a question, I guess, about the assumptions of the necessity of major trucks coming up and down Elmendorf, or even even coming to the Broadway site, because reviewing the square footage of the site and the retail capacity and the storage capacity, a big truck like what's envisioned as an issue doesn't make sense. And also if the focus is local food sourcing, then those big trucks are usually reserved for corporate agriculture. And that's like, when I think about a big truck like that, that's being talked about as an impediment. I only see that in a major supermarket operation, and for style. So I'm just curious if that was a major impediment, the truck access, could the site still be used and not remove that?
Yeah, I think there is a few things to unpack. There's one about the square footage, then a second about the produce selection and what may necessitate such a large truck. And then three, I'll try to touch on the site, knowing that, like, you know, I don't own the site, none of us on the site, so I can't tell you what will and won't happen, but I could project, you know, my thoughts around if some sort of food entity could have happened there. But the first one around the square footage. So we were assuming, say for on the upper range of our market study, I think it was 6,000 square foot of retail. Yeah, and then back of house, I don't have that number offhand. But that does put us in par in the mid-range of supermarket territory. So we would have been a pretty big co-op. The second is the size trucks for our distributors. So we were doing conventional, non-conventional with a heavy emphasis on local products, which means by partnering with different distributors, that size truck still wasn't a rollout. And even when we talk to our grocery consultants as to whether or not we do that as a thing, right? Limit the size of trucks, given the fact that, you know, conventional, non-conventional, and we want to emphasize local agriculture as much as possible. The recommendation is that we don't, because we risk not having the products that we need to even make a viable store. So we did entertain that second route of saying, like, hey, let's just limit the size of a truck. Do we actually need to work with people who deliver that big of a size? And the best you know, backed up assumption is that we do, actually. So, and then as far as like something working in that space, I think if the programs were looked at a bit more, where the amount of money being put into that site were perhaps to be lowered, and I'm sure everyone has a lot of ideas around it. If there could be some way to figure out, you know, kind of almost a simplification of that site, where the costs were a bit lower, then using those extra money to get offsite storage would have been dope. And I think it would have been a really fun opportunity to have like members driving, you know, things in vans to and from, you know, a storage, and partnering with other stores to kind of lower all of our costs on groceries. So I think something could work there if offsite storage were entertained yeah.
Well, I just want to say to your point, with using offsite storage, then you do assume other costs with that, transportation.
Yeah.
You know, heating the buildings, store, all of that. So it kind of.
Yeah, that's very good.
Fully evaluated, if you're saving or not.
Yeah. I think it'll have to be like very much a collaborative effort with other food entities, which you know, luckily we've begun to build those connections at the time. So I think if we actually had the opportunity, I would say, to fully consider that site and then kind of rehash those connections and kind of like come together and think of something, I think that I do think it would have worked, but you know, it's just, you know, we ultimately didn't get the opportunity either. So
can you explain what you mean by that? Like, we didn't have the opportunity to fully entertain like what's possible from that site?
Yeah, I think well, there was a string of meetings that happened between kind of pausing on the Capitals project piece to fully transferring fully transferring the functions over to NoVo, and then ultimately moving out of the location. And I think it seems as though everyone came to the table with whether or not we should stay in the location. There are some people who are very pro it and reasons backing it. There are some people who are very against it and reasons backing it. And I think NoVo was somewhere in the, hey, I think you all should move away from the location. So ultimately, in my personal assessment, it was more people were pro kind of leaving the location of the people who were tasked with kind of making decisions around it than those who were pro keeping it. And if you were to keep it, then you kind of look at the building again and kind of restart the whole process. But for many reasons, I can't really speak for others. You know, a lot of people had against it, and the ultimate decision was, all right, let's move from the location.
I guess there's two parts to my question. One is I'm a little bit interested in learning more about the process of the final, like whether it's a final decision to move away from this location, because part of what I'm thinking about is like, I know that some of the considerations that went into choosing that location is like wanting to be based in Midtown, be accessible via walking, for Midtown residents, being something in that community. And I know that there's like an ideal version of like capacity, of size, of access, of, you know, all the things that would make it a perfect location for a large thing that can hold all the programs and all the, you know, food that we want. But I guess I'm wondering, like, are there actually any such sites available in Midtown Kingston? Like, does that exist? Has there been research done into not even what's on the market, but just like what actually exists and whether that's possible in this landscape and community? It's a genuine question. I don't know myself. And so I'm just curious whether that was done before the decision was made to walk away from this site, because if that actual type of site doesn't exist in Midtown Kingston, then maybe there's an opportunity to rethink what it is we're actually building as a food co-op. So that's one thing. And I think the other question I have is, I know this is a members meeting, so this is a space for members to talk about what's happening and share and engage in conversation. But it does sound like a primary decision maker that you were alluding to was that NoVo preferred to walk away from the site, and they're the ones who own the land, who own the space, who are heavy influence in decision making. And I guess I'm wondering what the opportunity is for them to hold an open town hall for members to come and talk directly to them about what they're interested in, bring more people to the table. I know, of course, like we elect council members to represent views, and also I'm sure a lot of people would feel more heard if they could speak directly to NoVo as a stakeholder that has a lot of power and is exerting influence on what happens for the future of this project.
So first one about other sites. No. At the time, I think if my memory serves me well, we were so deep into kind of like closing out the process that when we had the talks of whether or not we stay in the location and that final decision was made, I do not remember there being any other sites being in full consideration. I think that happened after the fact, where we began to explore different sites. Two, there are sites that exist in Midtown. One that I was reached out to recently, that is one of the factories right behind the current location of the co-op, that may be viable. I'm not fully sure. There's also one that we saw on the opposite side, forgetting the name of the street. Foxhall. Yeah, there's a site on Foxhall that's commercially viable. Seems like it has the spatial requirements we would need. And
I add,
Yeah.
well, add to your question is that at that time, we were, like Kivi said, in the process of closing it out and then figuring, okay, like, how do we announce this to the community? How do we answer questions? How do we deal with kind of the aftermath, people leaving and all of that? That we didn't have the capacity to look fully into new sites. So I also want to say that there could be a site that exists, and that's something that our capital project manager, Victoria, who I wish was here, because she could obviously explain a lot more. But sorry?
She's still on the project?
No, sorry, I did say R, that's the only one that we had, but former capital project manager, she was saying like, you know, there could be sites that are better suited for what this project can and wants to be, but we didn't have the capacity to look into that, you know, because like I said, we had to roll out the sad news, deal with all that came with that. So yeah. But we did have, like, we were kind of looking, but not really.
Yeah. I guess I know my comment was long-winded, but I guess maybe my concern that I was expressing was that that decision was made before figuring out whether there are any viable sites, because if there weren't any viable sites, it seems like a shame to have poured millions of dollars into getting to know this one site and making the decision to close it out if there are no ideal sites available, then maybe it makes sense to work with what we have. If there are ideal, better sites, then it makes sense. Okay, like this, we've, sunk costs, it's not gonna work. We're thinking long-term, let's move to a different focus. And so I'm just maybe planting a seed that like, if that research happens, it's okay to say like, turns out there are no viable sites. So let's go back to what we know and see what we can work with this and make possible within this space.
May I add something to that? It's just kind of important, and it's not a long-winded thing, is that I didn't realize before coming into being the executive team that there was a potential for the food co-op to own the site. My understanding as a member initially was that we would be renting at this site. So it felt, once I learned that piece of information, that was critical piece of information, because what it tells me is that we should step back from the grand vision and figure out a way to make the site work so that it's in community hands. Because I'm 100% hearing what you're hearing, or what you're concerned about, which is NoVo's outsized influence in a community-owned project.
Sorry.
Oh, did I say
Kendall,
something?
Kendall has something she wants to add too. She's been very patient. Go for it, Kendall.
Thank you, Candace. Yeah, I'd like to touch on a few points that I remember brought up. Thank you for bringing up those points. Actually, I think it was Nina. But one thing I would start with is a comment that we chose this location. I just want to remind everyone that we did not ever choose this location for the co-op that we were building. We were gifted the building and then continued building the co-op simultaneously while already having a building, not necessarily choosing a building that worked for us. So something that language that Siobhan used a lot when we were going through the whole process, the pause and evaluation, was that we were trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. And that, I think, is one of the most accurate ways to describe what was happening. It really was a process issue where we already had the building, and then we simultaneously said that we can envision any store we want. We told the members to just dream big, think of anything that they want, and we're gonna envision the perfect store without considering site constraints. So we had the perfect store vision and then tried to fit it into the site and realized that it wasn't going to work. What we had envisioned, all those months of planning, all the group visioning that we did, wasn't going to fit into that building. So that's when we realized that the only way to stay, it was either the vision or the building. We had to make a choice between the two, ultimately. And the issue there is that of course, a huge issue was that the price skyrocketed in trying to turn that building into what we wanted it to be. And when we took that pause to evaluate, maybe we were trying to look at what our priorities are, if there was a way for us to still try to fit in as much of the programming and all those things that we wanted, if we could really try to squeeze it in to that building. And by August, after a few months of that, every day was costing us thousands of dollars. And I have brought this up before, but that we had the construction team already contracted, waiting for us. We were already paying them to be working full time, but there was no building that they were working on. So every day, every month, we were paying them thousands and thousands of dollars, along with the architects, along with the grocery store planners, along with everybody. So the longer that we waited, and if we started the process all over again, we can just double all the expenses. So I do think the decision was made potentially with a bit of panic. Now, looking back in retrospect, we can see that maybe there were more options, but in the moment, all we knew was that we were spending a ton of money without producing what the members asked us to produce. So there was a little bit of panic. And I think that's where the relationship with NoVo, where we felt a little bit of strain, that we were spending so much money without having much to show for it, and knowing that we were gonna have to backtrack. And with the backtrack, the only thing we could do was end those contracts, the contracts that we already had with the construction team and everything, because we couldn't keep paying them. And I think with that, it was just it was just more of a, well, maybe we need to just pause everything because we can't keep spending all this money, and we are losing the trust, and we need to be able to take a minute and reevaluate what's going on here. And I also just want to say that NoVo did not say no, did not suggest to us that we move away from the building necessarily. We had a series of conversations with NoVo, very just open and honest, where we were talking about our perspectives. They gave some perspective, but it wasn't that NoVo, for the sake of NoVo, wanted us to step away from the building. That I just want to clear that up, that never happened. So yeah, I just want to clarify a few things in that also, you know, we are now looking in retrospect and can honestly say that there might have been more options, and that we can look at more options going forward as well. I think that, as someone just brought up, that if we do see, because there are a ton of benefits to that location. We know that the actual location of it is incredible. The accessibility of it is really great. So, you know, with guidance from the membership, there are options to look at all locations, including that one as potential moving forward. In terms of what got shut down before, it was that vision that we had that couldn't push forward in that building. So whatever we do going forward now, you know, will be a new vision, and that's essentially where we're at with that. I'm sorry for taking so much time, but I hope that might have clarified a little bit.
Thank you, Kendall. I didn't hear you bring up the part about the tax base being raised a lot, Kevius, by the addition.
Analysis, yeah.
Yes, by the addition of the building, as Kendall mentioned, with that vision in mind and what we were trying to create, had a lot of consequences for the surrounding buildings because of the cost of the taxes.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly, but that was my understanding, is that putting that building in that space as it was designed and with all the costs associated with it was going to raise the taxes for all of the neighboring buildings, and that would likely cause people to be pushed out or for rents to go up or all that thing, and that was just something that we didn't feel comfortable doing, I think, for good reasons.
Yeah, and I mean, I have a good conscience. Like, I don't think that if the primary thing is to get groceries to people, I personally don't see a reality in which, like, we all said, oh, like, you know, having a commercial kitchen in addition to that and this sort of like outweighs, you know, the building itself. So I do think I can respect that perspective and introduce the fact that I know, like, all of us on the council, especially, who are so into food justice and getting things out, were more than willing to come up with a new vision for that building, and full consideration and respect to what every member had vouched. And a lot of members expressed to us that too. Well, maybe like refine some things, take some programming out. So I think there's definitely like, you know, acknowledging that perspective, there's definitely still like, hey, the fact that, you know, we were gifted a building that, you know, if you look at what a gift is, you will have it, right? Until you're ready to let it go. And right now, we don't have the building, and NoVo is running events to see what goes into that building. So I don't know if that building is still on the table for the co-op. And yeah, so I do think that I don't want to diminish any sentiments around members with how they feel about NoVo or how they feel about the council to just outright say, like, you know, we just moved because of a vision. There are a lot of factors, and I could definitely acknowledge that as being one. And while also acknowledging the fact that, you know, it takes a lot to sort of get resources behind building this. And, you know, respectfully, anyone who's giving resources to something, especially if those resources are finite, you know, they have to agree to what you're putting the resources toward to say if they want to support it. And we hit that point, you know, like, can you all support this? And it kind of hit a point of like, we can support that if it were something different, you know? And so now it is what is the something different? Is it in that location or is it elsewhere? Right now, it's not in that location. And so it's elsewhere. And that's sort of like where we are. So yes, like NoVo as any funder will accept it. And I think what the co-op, you know, to not relinquish any of that decision-making, could look into alternative ways of funding. And and I think that could diminish a lot of the concerns a lot of folks had around it, because, you know, this is a for-profit that's something nonprofit funding, right? So mission critical is something big into that too. And yeah, so I think definitely going forward, because I want to address your second point about a NoVo town hall. I think it's 100% possible. You know, we meet with NoVo as a full team once a month. My suggestion would be opening that up, you know, probably once a quarter or something, airing everything out, hearing it from the sources ourselves, and pushing for it that way. So I don't want to say that's not possible. I think it's fully possible. I think it should happen. Because I can't tell you what's on NoVo's brains. I can't tell you what's on anyone else a part of this project's brain. But all I know is, like, you know, when if someone's footing the bill for something, they're gonna want to say in it, because it has to be reflective of their values too, so they can stand in full, you know, support of it. And ultimately, I think what this community has come up with for that space is not fully supported in that that iteration of it. And right now is, I think the vision has to exist elsewhere.
Kristen?
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to share, I had to look it up to get the details on it. I don't know if anyone has heard about the Midtown Thriving meeting that is happening next week. Great. Question marks on everyone's faces. Good. So, well, not good, but I'm not like repeating anything. So the city of Kingston, sorry, I work for the city of Kingston and the Department of Health and Wellness. I do not work for the Department of Housing Initiatives. Please don't ask me questions about that. Bartek is a very smart person and he's really lovely and friendly. Talk to him. He would hate me. He's like, Kristen, why are you sending me everyone? But no, he's fantastic. Bartek is amazing. So the city of Kingston, this has in partnership with Hudson Valley Pattern for Progress, won a Brownfield Opportunity Area grant. And so what they're doing with this is developing a project called Midtown Thriving, a community vision to revitalize vacant properties. So they are hosting this meeting that is on April 10th at 6 p.m. to talk about vacant and abandoned properties within a 270-acre area that runs along the Broadway corridor. So what they're doing right now is asking for a community-informed, community-driven plan in order to develop these buildings. I tried looking up which buildings these were because I thought maybe people would ask questions like, are they viable at all? I don't know. It's not on the Engage Kingston page, so we'll blame Bartek for that one. Sorry, Bartek. And the idea is that once we have this plan, it will complete the BOA nomination and unlock tax credits that will encourage the redevelopment of properties in alignment with the community's vision. So I just put that out there as an option. I will be attending myself because the city of Kingston is developing a food system plan. And I already emailed Bartek and I was like, is it appropriate for me to attend and shout like food retail locations? And he was like, yes, please attend the meeting on April 10th. Is it virtual? Yeah. But so you have to register for it. I can send you the Engage Kingston page so that you can share that out. There's a link to register to receive the link for the virtual meeting. It will also be at City Hall, I believe, and council chambers.
I love that you brought this up because I had seen this and I immediately thought, because there is a building on the parking lot is on O'Neill and it's not been developed in many years because it is a brownfield site, and I saw that and I was like, that would be a good site, but it's such a cleanup. But if there's money to clean it up, it would be a really good co-op site. And I strongly, as a member, would love it if the council could look into that for the exec team or whatever, you know, who you the movers and shakers now of this co-op, if you could go out and forth and ask if that's viable.
Is it near the Broadway end of O'Neill, or
it's near the Broadway end, but it's like, yeah, it's like maybe a block in.
Okay.
You've seen it and not noticed it. It's an abandoned parking lot. It's been yes. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So I mean, yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about that too, about looking at the sites, but yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I have your email, Siobhan, so I can send that to you so that people have that information. But I really encourage people to go. I know like there's always plans being made, and sometimes it's like, oh, there's another plan and meetings that the city hosts as a municipality. I get all of that. But it is the opportunity to provide feedback. And as someone who hosts public meetings, sometimes when people show up and people don't show up, it's like, well, I have to receive this feedback because they are the person who showed up to my meeting, even when I know perhaps there are other perspectives and other visions as well. So just encourage that.
Oh, thank you.
I want to come.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Anyone online?
What is your sense of the current status of the NoVo funding? I mean, are they still kind of full speed ahead on whatever process the community comes up with, or are there now some limitations given the setbacks? I mean, anything you can say about that would be, I think, helpful.
The status of NoVo funding. Okay, all right, cool. I'll start. All right. So later in this presentation, we'll talk about working groups. Where we're inviting like just everyone as members to basically read us, where like, pick up the pieces. Like, where do we start? Look at new locations. Look at different funding options. Look at like different things that we may have not incorporated into our model, such as like a buying club or bulk buying, or all of these things, and basically kind of like redraft the co-op and come up with a proposal from there. So the status of NoVo funding is like, hey, we apply for a grant. Right now it is in September. There it is. Yeah, right now it's in September. And so I don't see us not approaching this like we approach every grant. That is, determine what it is we want to do, consider how much cash we have, and then request from NoVo, what we want to do going forward. And I think this is the first year where we've really intentionally created a process by which is a bit less removed from the council carrying a lot of that, and a bit more of inviting members in the form of working groups to have way more of a decision on even the granular details of the grant request that we usually give to NoVo. And in the past, NoVo has given us, I think a couple of years prior came was around $200K a year, and then it went to about 650, and then we introduced the capitalist project piece, and that was with us having almost nothing in it, supporting us operationally to get there. And I will say, I don't assume that this year it'll be to that degree, only because our net holdings are so high. Like, we have $500,000 in net holding. So I do think, if anything, it'll probably be a decrease, only because our net holdings are so high, unless the plan that is come up with requires way more, resources than in our net holdings.
Peter, so what is that due date when an application does have to go in for next year for a back? I don't
want to speak wrong because it's in the slides, but I believe in September is when
it has to go in September. It has to be approved.
It has to be approved and go in September. So they usually happen at the same time.
So that's a fairly tight time frame if the intent is to really get the more and more community input on something like this, right? I mean, it's
either more and more community input and or more and more members involved.
So Sway says we have less than those net holdings. Net holdings displayed as of December 31st, 2023. I don't know if you want to speak to that, Sway.
Yeah, so we don't have $500,000 right now in net holdings. We have a lot less. And so I wanted the membership to know that, because I know that it seems like we have $500,000, but those numbers are as of December 31st, 2023. So since then we have had some expenses, so our net holdings are a lot lower. I could get the exact number of what our net holdings is right now, and I could definitely email that out if the membership wants. But we have less. So that's what I wanted to add on, just clarification from that. And was it Michael Marks that asked the question?
Yes.
Dr. Marks, how are you?
Hello, Sway.
So to answer your question, there is no guarantee of NoVo funding. And I just want to be very transparent and clear that there is no, but we, as Kivia said, we are going to submit in September, and based off of all the projects and ideas and some of the strategic plan that we are creating that Kivius will be speaking about later on, we are hopeful that when we present that to NoVo, that they will then view that and decide to fund us. However, one of the things that we will discuss is diversifying our funding so that we are not solely reliant on NoVo.
How do the holdings go from $500,000 to 400,000 from December to April if there's no capital projects? Like what is that all being spent on?
Well, we have salaried staff, we have office which also comes with expenses. We have council stipends, for our council members. Yeah,
Have we
and then-
done those? And that's.
So that was.
we haven't
that
done
was-
since-
We have the programming initiatives that we have done since December as well.
And yeah, so I think the main thing is the supporting the team that's here, the introduction of the executive team. And most of our time has really been spent systems work. So as a lot of the previous council members know, we didn't have the most functional systems of management and everything through. So the executive team has been working really overtime with us on an hourly basis to help us clean up a lot of everything so that it can just flow and function going through. So since December, a lot of the time has really been working with professionals to make it so that community could just come in and we don't deal with the operational challenges we faced in the past.
Well, first of all, thank you. I very much appreciate the conversation about, the retrospective conversation about why that, what was it, 780 Broadway didn't work out. I mean, speaking for me, it was a big disappointment when I heard you had to give that up because the location seemed absolutely perfect. And because of it, I know that, I would like a food court to be situated in Midtown. I mean, it brings together the whole Kingston in the city of Midtown. I think it's, and I appreciate the transparency with which you've shared all things. I understand that setbacks happen, and it's hard for setback, and I want to applaud you all for hanging in there, the executive council and whoever you all are. It's clearly important I would like to hear, not now, but at some point, what have you learned going forward? What have you learned from this setback? You must be talking about it a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And let's not repeat mistakes. Let's make sure if we are going to move to another site, that we really get the groundwork properly done. And something we haven't mentioned about the Broadway property was the underground storage tanks for oil. I mean, that's the kind of thing that and I'm going to sound critical, so I apologize, but it seems to me that could have been discovered very early on as an obstacle.
It was known.
Yeah.
The amount of tanks that were under there were not known, but NoVo did a very comprehensive environmental, what are they called? I can't remember anymore. Environmental state, you have to do it when there's possibility of, because it was an auto body shop. So they had the environmental remediation, whatever done, first level and second level. So most of that stuff was known. And NoVo had said that they would deliver the building to us with all that remediation completed. When this construction firm came in that the council had hired, they did deeper probing, and there was just more than there was more discovered. But it was always known that those were there and that it would be an expensive property to rehabilitate. That was not new information. Yeah.
And well, no, I think another fully transparent point is that also ended up being factored into our construction costs too.
Yeah.
Which made things a bit difficult.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I also want to commiserate that when you notice that you were spending millions of dollars for no product, as somebody said, that must have been, I mean, just thinking about as a householder and my budget, that's really not important. Must have been awful. And it's galling because, money isn't easy for many people, as we know.
I mean, even our time, the folks spent a lot of time. I have another organization that I struggled to show up for a lot of times, just trying to push this project forward. So I mean, it's a lot of resources that went into it.
Yeah,
and it's very hard.
So it's great you're continuing. Did I hear you say you're going to have focus groups going on so that some of this ongoing information can be shared rather than stored up for one great big dollop once a year, which is a lot to take in? Would be great, I think, if we could participate and really keep it a cooperative, a community cooperative. And I have wonders about NoVo. It's great to have money, but its strings are attached, and it's not. I understand that their money is doesn't go on for eternity. It's really important to establish other sources of funding. And it really become a community cooperative and things. And the last thing I wanted to say was, I think we could start small. I was rather shocked to hear that one of the reasons in terms of access and the trucks that we were completing a 200 to 20-year growth organism starting in year 1. And that does not seem to me very realistic. Why not start with a small place that can deal with trucks from local farms, and we just start small and make it work?
Amen. Can I speak to that? I think, Jenny, Jenny is one of the members that has always shown up for all of the open council meetings and everything, and you've always been so supportive and vocal. And I just wanted to say that I wish as a co-op there were more members like you that came and spoke, because it's really what the co-op needs.
Yeah.
And but I did want to speak to the truck thing, because I think it's come up a couple of times, and I think it's a confusing notion for people, because you look at these big trucks and you think we don't need a truck full of stuff that comes. But I just want to explain that it's not about the co-op getting a truck full of stuff. It's about keeping prices affordable so that the actual grocery store can be accessible, because that was kind of the main focus, at least when I was involved in leadership, was really making it affordable and accessible. So in order to do that, there's, nationwide distributors that provide some of the basics. So even if you're looking, we're going to have all local produce and we're going to have so many local products, but to keep it affordable, there are some things to make it a place where people only have to go to one store to shop. You don't get a full truckload of things. You get some things that come off a truck, and those trucks are big because that's how the distributor makes it, delivers. And you don't get a choice as to the size of the truck that they use. And to have a completely local store, which I can't speak for everyone, but I think most people would love to have a store that is only stocked with regionally local products. But I haven't seen in the entire nationwide co-op movement a co-op that didn't think that would be wonderful and also could accomplish that. Because people need certain staples that aren't produced locally, or if they are, the price point is not accessible. So there's a lot of compromise that has to be made in order to get that accessible, affordable store. I'll pass it back over, because I know that you guys have done a lot of work on this, and I'd love to hear what you say.
Well, you had a second part to it that I think was related to the truck and about the like, how do we, like, what's the starting point for the co-op, right? Like, and can we start small? And so I think yes. And so like, yes, in order to get this grandized vision of supporting all of Midtown, which is, really, if you have a solid funder behind you, and they're pouring millions, the best thing to do with millions is to make something that could get local produce at affordable prices. I think since that took a lot of our energy, we kind of like do a lot of like other programming to get it going, but that primary thing is what we're talking about now. The nourishment boxes was one of the ideas around, okay, well, how can we learn how to start something small and then gear up? And I think, just the School of Economics I come from, I'm always a fan of like, scaling up from small. We spend all day doing it. And I think that with the focus groups that we have planned now, we want to have both of those conversations, as I said, at the same time, have small things that are scalable and can scale up, and invest resources into something bigger that could benefit the whole community. So I think for a long time, we didn't necessarily have that, what can we do on a small scale that builds up to a grocery store, because we came with way more resources than the small scale. And now we're going back and saying, okay, let's piecemeal this and work our way up.
Okay. Brilliant. And you can imagine a story in 20, 30 years time. This amazing food co-op in Kingston started off with nourishment boxes. It's just a beautiful vision. I tend to speak from a visionary place. I challenge the notion that you would not want to offer a grocery store which did not have X, Y, and Z and A, B, and C for everybody to start with, because that is supporting a system that has to be ended. We cannot continue relying on food that's transported from California and Florida and wherever. We need to become local and to give in to a system that requires you to bring in whatever those trucks are called, because we can't have particular kind of vegetable we on queue, is wrong. I feel very strongly about it.
And I think, we have to balance that, because we work in that space a lot. Like, we're doing work in the food system, and it's also hard because, that also requires incredible coordination and that infrastructure to be developed to make it possible. right? Like even with us working with local folks, like, you know, we had a really big moment where we sold a head of cauliflower for like $4, right? And so yes, and right, like I think vision aligned, yeah, like we're all aligned in that respect, and you know, I think now there's been so much investment in the food system where even more than before, we can actualize something on a smaller scale with local folks and begin to work on what alternative delivery routes and opportunities look like between the food system plan that's happening, between more places coming online and depending on local produce so we can scale it a bit more. I think now is the time to kind of like look at that again.
I understand what you're saying, because I think that, so I want to kind of say that I can see both. So again, it's like the yes hands, kind of weird, but what you're saying. I don't know if we're going to know what works until we start trying to do something. I don't know if people are going to want to have access to affordable rice coming in the big truck and bulk, or if it would be affordable enough to have a small farmer dropping off a crate of lettuce. And so I don't know if we'll know until we start trying to do things saying one. And so I think that that's to that point of the small scale and the working groups trying to figure out like where we can start and create that those are interactive relationships and build that. And I always think of Hiroshima because my understanding is that they started everyone's just gathering there and conversation. Then they have many
really put a plug into what Jimmy, right? Said, you know, I think we haven't yet begun the process of like looking at the untapped resources in this community. You know, and looking at the cooperation and collaborations we can pay. You know, there are communities around the country that are looking at this, following sort of the vision that Jimmy mentioned. I would just really recommend that be kind of a real first step. I don't think that a one-stop shop store for everybody is really affordable and work. You know, I mean, I think if we start local and really look at our partners out there, you know, we can figure out ways for labor to be very cheap. And we can figure out ways for transport to be a lot cheaper. I mean, that we have a lot of resources in this community and a lot of farms very close, you know, so yes, it's not going to satisfy everybody and there's a diverse membership and we'll have to go through a process, but I do think, you know, I agree. I think that's the way to go. Yeah.
I also wondered, should we have something in the chat from Henry?
Okay.
He said, I think a one-stop store is a model too much influenced by supermarkets. Something akin to Davenport's in the food department, but with more food sources would be fine. And on top of that would come to the co-op's educational and community space mission. Just wanted to share that.
Can I also highlight something that I believe Lindsay, I can't see, so I believe I heard Lindsay's voice. Hi, Lindsay. But I believe that Lindsay said that one of the things that we want to do is to the point of offering local foods and only local foods is that we want to make sure that it is affordable. We don't want to have a cooperative or a place where people cannot equitably access the foods that we are having in our shelves. So we have to really think about the demographics around Midtown and Uptown, just in Kingston in general, and think about, can individuals afford to pay that $4 a cabbage, as Kivia said? So we want to make sure that, but that does bring a good point to see what type of grants or fundings we may encounter that can allow us to focus on local foods while also subsidizing the cost so that it could be affordable. Because I know for myself, you know, if I'm spending $100 worth of groceries, I need it to last for a very long time. And I'm only one person. Imagine a single mother of 3 living on Broadway, you know, making sure that her groceries last a long time. So we also got to think about that as well. Thank you, Lindsay, for bringing that point up.
Crystal?
Yeah, actually, that gives me something else to comment on. I was going to push back a little bit on the idea of not having a one-stop shop place. I used to work at a food bank and I worked at a food pantry, and so generally my work is primarily people who are food insecure or people who are receiving SNAP. And time is really valuable commodity, and with this idea, I think it's a little pie in the sky and privilege to say that people should be able to shop at multiple locations, because quite frankly, most of the people that I work with are working multiple jobs. They have children, they have other family obligations, they are caregivers of spouses, of siblings, and of partners. And so when we're taking into consideration, I think, you know, it'd be beautiful. I'm a dietitian, I love food. Like, it'd be great to have this like model, like that feels more European, of stopping in multiple locations. But perhaps if we are trying to achieve that, having a larger plan and vision to ensure that if people are stopping by at this food co-op, that there are other locations within a very quick walking distance for people to visit, because time and transportation. So I don't know, I'm going to put that out there because I think that should be a consideration for this. I was going to actually, in another comment that was just made, was related to what I wanted to ask and suggest, was to see if there were any other grant opportunities that the co-op has explored. I know that given my work within food systems, there's a lot of upcoming funding opportunities, particularly from the federal government, from the USDA. And so I know that they're looking into like regional infrastructure funding. So, you know, there's just a big influx at this moment. I don't know specifics of something because I don't work in a space where I'm trying to create a for-profit business to suggest, but wanted to know if that's something that you've looked at, and whether it would be for a for-profit model going forward, or I'm actually going to Binghamton in May, and I've like pestered my grant enough for this convening to do a site visit at a nonprofit, which is something, yeah, Binghamton has one, and from what I've heard, it doesn't seem very sustainable, but it is really interesting to me. It seems really interesting to me, and it seems like everyone is really open to the idea of alternative models. So, comments, but my main question was the idea of looking into some of these like USDA or other food systems grants that make sense for the co-op.
Yeah. The only grant opportunity we've outright pursued was the partnership with the Kingston Farmers Market. However, I have begun to procure a list because I don't want to be too imposing on assuming like what the plan comes about at the end of this process with working groups. But one of the main deliverables of the working group is to look at that. And I've begun to put just a list together to get the working group sort of like started, which I look forward, you know, to everyone jumping in on that. But yeah, as of right now, the only core grant opportunity we've pursued is the USDA grant in partnership with the Kingston Farmers Market. And my hope is that, you know, with this sort of nudge, is that we get more and more grants. And I think perhaps like somewhere, because there's still this idea of like decentralization or decentralization of the co-op in a sense. And I think, you know, just to invite to the conversation, you know, I'm very much a pro of decentralized in a sense, not necessarily not having a one-stop shop, but I think what the Kingston Food Co-op is very much trying to achieve is one store for all of Kingston. And I think we can get that everyone can come in and shop for what you need. And, you know, looking at sort of like a decentralized model by like maybe something smaller uptown, something smaller Pankaki, something, you know, smaller midtown where the people in their immediate community can still go to a place where they get everything that they need in good proximity. So that's another sort of like thing I'll introduce to the conversation, which could lower the cost dramatically of any individual site, benefit from that scaling of all of the locations and that. So I think our big plans going forward is, as I mentioned, we spend so much time with the executive team just making it like work, making sure all of our systems are solid, making sure we're following all compliances and operational stability. And now that we've achieved that, we really wanted to set up a platform really for our members to come and be way more involved than before. And I hope that, you know, this process by which we come up with what happens during the year and how we apply for grants continues. And our three main goals going forward are one, engage members far much more in planning. I think the relationship right now has been a lot of, we have our annual meeting, a lot of ideas are procured there, and we do a lot of report backs. We're trying to shift that tone where we come together as a community really intentionally to say, this is what we want to do, this is how we want to do it, with the members who are willing to be a part of it, and really sort of like push us through going forward. So that's one, just getting folks way more involved in the nitty gritty of everything that is to occur at the co-op. The second is a sort of like review and reset. So we've been doing a lot behind the scenes, such as compiling all of our data around the Capitals project into a comprehensive report, all of our data around operations into comprehensive reports, auditing all of our systems, auditing everything, looking back at mistakes made, bringing them to the forefront, and then being very transparent about all of them so that everyone knows the sort of like weights that we're dealing with on our end that you may not be privy to, one, but then two, we put it out in the open so that as more people become involved and in the day-to-day of it, you're very clear as to, hey, why didn't you all do X, Y, and Z? Well, if you look on section 3 of this page, we tried it and this is how it turned out, so that we can all be very transparent going forward. And then the last one is the strategic expansion, which gets along the lines of what you were talking to, starting nuclear, starting small, really allowing diversification of funds to come in, really allowing for us to explore what does and does not work. So making sure we have that conversation front and centered to how can we go directly to neighborhoods and understand what folks are dealing with, and how can we, get way more integrated into the food system. And again, start small, start testing things out and allow for more and more folks to claim real estate into this project. I like to think of it as like, if NoVo's funding the whole project, then you have no other folks who are helping with it, and you don't have those other perspectives that are really necessary in order for your project to really have, the meat that it needs to go forward. The first group is our location and design solutions group. The objective of this group is to address the challenges that we encountered with the previous site by identifying viable new locations and exploring design strategies that comply with regulatory requirements, which we've been able to look back and procure, optimize delivery and logistical operations, and meet community needs. The expected outcomes of this group is a short list of potential locations, evaluated for feasibility, compliance, and community impact. A design principles and criteria to align with. That's one of the big things. What things are we prioritizing? What things are we willing to let go of? So that when we get to the point of any site constraints, we have a short list of things that we're willing to X off in a heartbeat. And then the last one is a preliminary design concept, which is really like a pre-design. When I walk into this space very roughly, what do I want to see, right? Do I want a place for groceries? Do I want a place for hot foods? Do I want a place for vendors? Like whatever it looks like, at the minimum level, we should at least have that alignment of those things that we find non-negotiable. And then we have some individual roles that we're looking for, particularly anyone with real estate experience, anyone who could be an architectural advisor, but then, anyone who's just interested in being in a community and, jumping into a conversation you probably know nothing about, but, you really want to be a part of, and you want to help, you're really passionate about things being built and you want to see it to fruition. We're looking for those focuses in this group.
I do want to jump in on this. I'm feeling like it's a little bit cart before the horse. I mean, I think the discussion we just started to have around the vision and how we're proceeding is actually essential. The decentralization versus centralization, one store versus multiple stores, it's actually essential. So to assign a group of people for that function seems to me a little premature. It's sort of like, I think we need to wrestle with, with this group and then with the larger community, the issue we just started talking about. I wouldn't know how to approach, if I was to serve on that focus group, how to approach that issue without having some sense of where the community is on the issue we just talked about. So I'm just struggling with that a little bit. Sort of like we're planning on a space, but we really don't know what direction yet we may be going in, because I think the issue we started to wrestle with the last half hour, I feel is absolutely essential. And it could be a hybrid too. It's not either or, it could be a hybrid. There's different ways to go. So just want to throw that out because we're breaking into focus on specific areas, but we still have a central issue that needs to be wrestled with, so help me on that a little bit, folks. Yeah.
Well, one of those areas in the focus group is looking precisely at that. So getting our heads out of the weeds and like really understanding what has been happening. We'll get to that. But I think they're all conversations that are happening simultaneously. Because at minimum, this group is having a clear understanding of the updated requirements. For example, high-level things such as what is zoned commercially and what is not zoned commercially of the available properties is something very simple for us to know. No matter where the group goes, we can look at that list, at that chart and go, all right, we want something that's small, maybe decentralized, just in Midtown, say that's the focus. That definitely will come out of this group so that when that strategic planning happens, you say, hey, this is exactly what we want to do. Shortlisted, you have exactly where you want to go, you have your funding opportunities aligned, and you have a clear sort of like vision of where you're headed. But we can get to the other two because I think it'll add context to what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay.
Second working group is the financial sustainability group. So no matter where you start, you need operational funding and you need capital funding. No matter where the project goes, there are a lot of opportunities to get you there. There are some research and development grants. So at the end of this working process, if folks say, hey, we kind of want to go into research and development on a concept, there are a lot of grant opportunities for that. There are a lot of local food system grants. There are a lot of folks who are willing to help with Capital's project. At minimum, you should be able to know what those opportunities are. At minimum, we should all be very, on the same page with respect to what our budget looks like. And we should have a plan for financial sustainability as a co-op. No matter where we end, we should know what these avenues are. We should know what these opportunities are. And when the decision-making time comes, we should be able to choose from that list of opportunities to what works for us. So the financial sustainability group would be focused on just looking at that, different opportunities of funding, different ways to use the capital that we currently have to be leveraged into whatever opportunities this co-op will like to pursue. And we're looking for folks who are budget analysts, folks who are funding strategists, and folks who are interested in just creating business models. And we'll release more information around the specific details of it, because some we really want you to have pre-existing knowledge, some like you just show up and give your thoughts as if you're a visionary and you're just passionate about certain things coming to fruition to help sort of like mold that group. This is a really good time to sort of like jump into it. And the primary goal of this group is to diversify funding for all developmental aspects of the co-op. And then the last group is the community engagement and planning group. So we've done a lot of community engagement. So some of the pieces what you're alluding to, Michael, is we need to go back through a lot of that. We're also in a process of knowing that everyone is surveyed out. So we have a lot of information and data as to what folks will like. So this group will concentrate on all of that, get an update on all of that, get updated reports on what's been happening in the food system, and kind of work in concert with the other groups on, okay, well, where can we carve our space for ourselves? What approach is the best one that we should take given all of this data, all of this information, all of these things that we have? And lastly, what has come up recently from the community with the nourishment boxes has been the idea of a buying club, which is something that we hadn't incorporated into the actual business model. So looking at that as a route, speaking to, are there any updated sort of like ways that the co-op can claim space in the community? And that's the community engagement group. We're looking for folks who can do community outreach, folks who are interested in some sort of buying club and figure out ways to make that sustainable. And then some folks who are just interested in feedback from the community and different ways that we could gather that and push that forward. And then the next piece. Yeah, so the expectations of all the groups is beyond, we only expect for the groups to meet 2 hours a week. There we go. 2 hours a week to the group. That's mainly because we have a working council who's doing the work. So really the goal of these groups is just to drive and direct and keep us all in line. So for example, we don't expect you to come into the group in your 2 hours a week to procure a whole budget. Right? You can go to the folks who have experience in it and who's been tasked with creating a budget, for example, and direct them based on the outside research that we do together as a group and everything. And then we are offering $15 an hour optional stipends for folks who would like to participate in the groups for the duration of the groups. We specify just different touch points that all the groups will have. So we will come back, we will have one really big meeting outside of your 2 hours a week where we come and strategically plan as a group. There's been an incredible consultant. We're going to work with Ray Gomez, who has experience in cooperative development to help, just get the group started on one big strategic plan together. Then we'll go off into our groups midway in the process. We'll come back together, update each other, look at that plan, adjust it quarterly, go back out again, and then come back together at the end with all of that research with like, all right, here's what I found, here's what we found, here's what we found, and jump into a strategic planning process again, where you could basically say, all right, we saw the world, right? We have everything down. We have, a clear understanding of what is required to go in any direction. We've done our research. Now let's come together and strategically plan exactly where we want to go. What is the best direction? How are we going to get there? What funding sources are we using? All of these things. And it all lines up perfectly for that decision to be made a few months before the NoVo grant is due. So that gives everyone a time, to say, all right, this is what we want to do as a co-op. This is how we want to get there. We've identified our funding. We've gotten community information. We've gotten our data. This is the relationship we want with NoVo, and just really have that time together to, put forth exactly, what it is the co-op wants to do, and really kind of drive the ship a bit more.
One tweak I have to throw on the table is I think we should think a little bit more of the stipend. I think it has to go up a little bit. I also think we need probably a pot of money to deal with challenges like childcare, elder care. The model that the community fund used is something we should look at. They spent a good deal of time sort of recruiting for community engagement to get people who are really interested, and they're offering some nice stipends. People are just not going to have the time to actually contribute. I don't think $15 an hour is going to do it, and especially if we want more community members in this room. So just wanted to throw that out as a tweak. And I also want to reiterate what I said earlier. I think the community engagement piece has to be a high priority. So we address that first issue more quick. Once that first issue gets addressed, then I think the financial and the other two communities become even more essential.
Thank you, Michael. Sway, I saw a comment or in the chat, no more stipends. Could you just unmute and clarify a little bit? I don't want there to be confusion.
What I meant is that based off of the financial report that we have given, we want to make sure that we are, to keep us this point, we're using the individuals to really hold us accountable and drive us and then we do the work itself. The reason why is because we need to be fiscally thinking that if we don't have any more funding as of right now, we still want to be able to do this work and still strive to get this completed and done. So I want to make sure that we are cognizant of that as far as the stipend, and we're really hoping to engage the membership and wanting to really help us push this forward, keeping in mind that we are limited as well.
Yeah, I just think if you want to, I think we have to relook at the budget then that way, because I think if you really want community engagement, we have to walk the talk, and we're going to have to offer stipends for folks who are not in this room. That's what the track record is saying as far as how difficult it is to get people in this room.
And wait, I'm sorry, if I missed it, because now I'm confused. Are we offering stipends or are we not?
I think he's saying the current budget doesn't allow for it. That's what I heard.
Yeah, so there's a little discrepancy there. So I'm not sure. Asking the council for clarity, maybe Kendall can.
I don't know what that was alluding to, but so there's $15 an hour optional stipends for the folks who participate in the working groups.
2 hours a week.
Sorry?
2 hours a week.
2 hours a week. Yep. So, but every hour you're with it, that's the current piece. I think what he was probably alluding to is we balanced it and landed on that because the council will really be doing the majority of the work, the council and staff, and you all folks are there to really push us and completing that work and help guide us and direct us. But I certainly think if it were hey, we need you to jump in and create a financial feasibility plan, I definitely think those numbers will go up. But I suggest that at our next open council meeting, come to the meeting. I can take away from this meeting to relook at if there's anything that we could do to increase that stipend. But also at the same time, our resources are limited. And I think let's just provide an update at the next meeting on that, on whether or not we're able to increase it. But I will say right now, like there's a lot of due diligence put into seeing what number was viable, considering the fact that we have what we have, and we want to keep the possibilities open as to what we accomplish. So that burn rate is it gets sticky. So yeah, I think like let's take away from this meeting to relook at it, and if there's something that can be done, we'll do it and update it in this meeting. And if not, then we'll let you know can be done.
I was like looking, I just feel like 2 hours a week is a lot. Maybe because I have a toddler. I'm like, oh my God, I have no much time right now. If the real purpose is kind of like accountability, it sounds like for these folks, like that could perhaps be done in less time, and then each hour could be valued at a higher dollar amount, and it would be the same budget.
I mean,
yeah.
Maybe not. I feel like I think it's like, no, that's not gonna work.
May I jump in? I mean, this is totally open for input. Of course, if we're looking to make work groups for the members to lead, then the members should have input on what that looks like. So this is definitely open for input. Thank you all for the feedback. And I would like to clarify the decision that was made about stipends. While this can be looked at again, the decision that was made about stipends is that this would be a volunteer position, and that if someone faced barriers that would not allow them to volunteer, but they still wanted to be a part of the group, that we could then offer them a small stipend in order to secure their participation, is the official decision that was made. Not that we would lead with the option that anyone could have a stipend, but rather that if someone felt they needed compensation in order to be able to participate, that we could open up that option for them.
When we were given the budget, this is going back to the budget, there was a line that said membership reimbursement, and it's about $16,000. I'd like to know what proportion of the total membership that was, because it's really geared towards community engagement. And you probably know, but there's a general sense of disappointment, and I'm wondering how we can cope with that moving forward to re-engage people in their optimism and their hope and their wish and their vision for a co-op, having been disappointed after 4 or 5 years hanging in there. I don't want to sort of beat a dead horse, but I do think that needs to be considered. You lost how many members through that?
It was close to 200 out of 1,300. Yeah. Yeah, and it takes a little above that now, the 200 mark, but yeah, it was a lot of numbers.
What percentage is that? I can't do percentages.
It's like 90%. Back if you look at left, it's like.
Yeah, I think it's between 12 and 15.
Oh, okay. So it's not much. It's not drastic. Okay. All right.
And I think like I don't know why people bounce off, but I think everyone has sort of like within the project what they're most passionate about. Like, for example, you all are here, and a lot of people who come up to the meetings are really much more passionate about the organizing aspect. Some folks are just way more passionate about sort of the end goal aspect. And I think a lot of the comments that we got from the folks who left were oh, it's not happening at that location, or I'm not sure if a functional grocery store is the end goal, therefore I'll reinvest. A lot of folks said they will reinvest when the store opens, or when they hear something that alludes to that. So. And we're at the 5-year mark now of this project, and that's half the average. So we're kind of on par with the opening of most co-ops, if you look at it in that sense. And I think a lot of it, which we've addressed in years too, is just communicating, the ins and outs of what really goes into this, so that folks could carry a bit more grace in their in their assessment of whether or not they would like to continue to support the project.
So when you give out your nourishment boxes, are you including information about participating in the planning of the food cart? I mean, is that all part of your, your whatever your activity?
In the past, when we did the nourishment boxes, yes. So we made sure to include information about relevant things that were happening, ways for folks to get involved, encouragement that folks, go to the site, come to the meeting, stay up to date in them.
I've been a member of the co-op for a couple of years at this point, but often can't attend meetings. I mentioned I have a toddler. He's insane. But wondered, I think for me, so my work has long been community-based, and particularly now in the city. This was my first job out of government, which has been like kind of an interesting transition from nonprofit to working for a government. And community engagement is always kind of the hardest part, like just getting people to show up. So one thing that I've been exploring with some of this work is trying to partner with events that are already happening, with projects that are already happening. And so rather than trying to recreate the wheel or do things on my own, using built-in community, built-in developed trusted relationships, and kind of this avenue. So I've been sitting here trying to think of like, who would be a good partner in this work? But I don't need to come up with an answer right now. But so just wondered if there was, I don't know, like some way to do that for the community engagement. Also, I'll put in a plug. Maybe there's someone to come hang out at Earth Fair this year. It's Saturday, May 11th. We have exhibitors. It's a way to talk with community members. I'll be there. Also, if you have a food vending business, come let me know. Just thinking about.
I know the person paying that event, so actually get some information to her.
Oh, I mean, I'm on the
From Clearwater, right?
No, I'm the planning event.
Oh, you're planning.
Yeah, it's truly it's Clearwater in collaboration with New Yorkers for Clean Power and the City of Kingston. The City of Kingston is the host.
Oh, okay, so we have to.
So yeah, so you get
I know the Clearwater.
Yeah, we have like a planning committee that is a part of that, and also, I mean, I'll say, we've got the food system plan developing that is hopefully going to be completed by the end of the summer. So, I would encourage everyone to continue to see the public engagement opportunities for that, because I see many people saying that they want something like this, and it's helpful in the municipality end if I can put it into our plan, because then that will allow us, one, to apply for funding to support community activities, and two, this plan will be put forth towards the Common Council, and the Common Council will adopt it like they've adopted the bicycle and pedestrian master plan. And then that gives myself and the department more leverage to say like, hey, like, could we put things in our budget going forward? Like once it's an adopted policy. But I think that the plan hopefully will reflect about community input, and that's where we have community members show up to support it. It's ultimately not exactly the plan, but then to support like activities and businesses and food systems change like the co-op is doing.
In short, yes. I mean, I've been a strong advocate in trying to just like making sure we have, well, even the store itself, when a lot of our energy was just focused on that, just introducing to, different partners and people that we collaborated in the food system to make it, like truly a collaborative process or a collaborative entity amongst all, as many, like I will smush as many organizations together as possible. But yes, especially now going forward, part of one of the working groups is I procured just a list of things happening, folks who are doing things, what their focuses are, the calendar of events as I began to understand them, so that we can use that as ways to understand how our engagement going forward looks like. So it really is a matter at the point of what is determined at the end of that process for how the Kingston Food Co-op engages in community. My hope is that it moves in that direction. I think it's the only way to do it, as a collaborative effort, and we don't have to do everything ourselves. I think it strengthens, anyone in business will tell you it makes marketing a lot easier. It makes developing your core audience a lot easier. So I hope that that's the direction the co-op goes in. And at this point, it's just a matter of what's determined at the end of that process, and being very intentional if that is the route chosen to procure those relationships.
Both Jenny and Kristen brought up the time commitment that it takes to be involved, and not always being able to do that. as a member. And one of the ways I think that you all could maybe help us as members understand what's going on is have more transparent communication that comes to us. I know that since I left the council, I haven't really understood what was going on, except for the communication about walking away from the building. That was the major communication. And then when you would send the meeting recaps, there wasn't a recap. It would just be like you can watch the video, but not an actual recap. So people that maybe are in their mail, they could read it and know what was happening. And I know it's sort of like a broken record, right? I feel like we've been talking about this for years now, how to do transparent communication well. It's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do. But I would encourage you all to remember the importance of that. And then another thing that I think has come up over the years again and again and again is community engagement. It's not something that this co-op has ever really done well. It's something that we continually talk about. Every year there's a new strategic plan, and every year a major part of that strategic plan is community engagement and how do we really engage with the community and what does that look like? And every year there's a new plan on how to do that. And here we are, year 5, and still having that same conversation. And I think it can be really frustrating for members, especially members that have been here for a long time, saying like, I already told you what I wanted. I've already answered these questions. And when new information comes, like Michael was saying, it's great to bring that into the conversation. We have to keep bringing in the new information that comes because the systems are changing and we have more access to the different ideas, but let's incorporate it into something and keep moving forward. And it sounds a lot like like we're locked in the cycle of like we just start over every year. And so I think that's a real concern is I think your focus groups are a great idea. I think Michael's idea of one of them starts later because one of them needs a little more information to do its job. But that's great. But I saw in your plan that there's like 12 people on each focus group. And there's 12 people at this meeting. So that's like, how are you going to do it? How are you going to run these focus groups, which a variation of this was in the plan for last year and the year before. So how do you actually get it off the ground and accomplish it? I think that that's something that everyone needs to be really honest about because it's going to be hard. The nourishment boxes, for as many people like them, it served less than 10% of the community. The buying group, for as excited as people are about it, we did research that in year 2. It's expensive. It takes a lot of infrastructure. So like all these things are great, but they're not actually servicing the community that is part of the co-op. So that is the co-op. So these aren't new questions. I'm not bringing up new things, but it has to be dealt with. There's staff, there's a paid council, like how to get the work done, how to actually move forward with this is key. And on that note, your term is over. Siobhan left the council, we didn't know. There's 2 council members. That is actually in violation of the bylaws. You have to have 4 council members. So I don't know what the plan is to solve that problem, but you right now are in violation since she left the council. So what's the plan? Yep. How are you going to get more council members? Because you have to.
Yeah, we've been procuring more council members, and that's been ongoing for us. And that's one of the things of like even dealing with the environment. Like people have hesitancies about joining the project given the nature of the development right now. And so for us, it is balancing everything of like, hey, for example, we could sit in a room for an hour and come up with a plan that I'm sure can align with 99% of members. But can't do that when you are in violation of your bylaws, right? And so, yeah, we're kind of like trying to balance all of those things at the same time. There are people who are very interested in joining council at one point in the developmental process who have lost interest given the fact that we've moved from that location. So it's just tricky balancing all of it. We could stop and find, the person who's willing to jump on it now, which we had done at a period. But then that kind of like leaves a lot of the progress going forward on things kind of like open. But then how do we hold ourselves accountable for the fact that we have resources and time that is leaving and needing to do both of those things at the same time. So yeah, we've been aware, we've been reaching out, we've been, really trying to get someone, because, being a part of the council is decision making, and it is like you're liable for a lot of things. You're a director, you're an officer of this thing. And sometimes we found that that's a threshold that some folks are just not willing to cross. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
On the community participation, I was thinking, PWI.
Yeah.
Participate in one of their community fund, how to participate in community fund. And it's all about many questions, and I was participating in several of them. Was that it is so very difficult to really reach the community and get them profoundly difficult. So ultimately what they ended up started doing is they elected something like 20 people from the community, and they're spending like one a year. Screened and paying stipends for them too. Help with that. Right. So do you know anything about that? I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think even with us too, because another thing to balance is people are in a lot of ways sick of the Kingston Food Co-op. So like and I think when you're starting a project and you're getting those committees started, which the co-op followed that rubric a lot. Getting folks on a concentrated effort in a room to push something forward and different committees towards. In the inception of something, it's a lot easier to kind of like pull people in than where we are now. And so, yeah, we're just at that point now of like, trying to reconnect people to what is a Kingston Food Co-op, while also not trying to overstate what that is, because that requires community to kind of like really guide the process of telling us in a sense of what it is.
Yes, I would love to know. Because my understanding, because we lost people were, again, like people aren't interested in being involved because that was what they were invested in. So then if we try to back up, go to the Spires Club, which apparently has been visited before. I didn't realize there was a lot of what the expenses were to that. I'm curious to hear more about that. But just trying to work with the modality and the structure of a co-op. It's interesting because we do have to move forward with consensus or consent from the members. How do we get? So I'm probably reiterating. How do we get the consent? How do we get the input? How to move forward, in what direction, then how do we get people to engage in that direction? So we thought a fractal, a smaller level, and then from out of that grows the house to put it in. But we have been trying different methods to find people to come on board. So we'll just keep trying until something shifts.
I guess, one thing that's making me think about this talk about community engagement is that something that I just started doing, not really intentionally, just because I was curious, was rather than asking the community to come to me at the city, that I went to the community. So I showed up at this meeting, one, because I'm a member of the Food Co-op, and two, because I do this work. And so I kind of represent the city at all times because I do this work and I feel really passionate about it. And so I think that in my history of doing community work, it's always asking, come to us, come to us, come to me, come to me. And maybe it is a reframing of going to them. And that takes more time. That is a little bit messier. That's not so clear cut. I think you can still be really intentional about it. But, and I know we're talking about time, and that's how it's not like an abundant resource that many people have, but when I see people asking me to do things and I'm like, well, but we have a meeting that already talks about that in Kingston. We already have a meeting that talks about that in Kingston. We already have this other meeting, and I didn't see you at any of these meetings. And you were telling me that community engagement is important to you. Really, how engaged are you with the community? Because there's a whole bunch of other things that are already happening and you didn't show up to any of them, but you want me to go to your meeting. So I think that it could be something to reframe that rather than asking people to come to any of these things going to them. So I don't know, just a thought, I want to put that out there. Also, I will say I talk to a lot of people about food stuff, and people are always asking me about the food co-op, like I know anything, and I'm like, y'all, like you should go to the meetings. But I think people are still really excited about it, and quite frankly, most people tell me that they just wanted a place to shop for food.
Yeah.
You know, I know that like, oh my god, like I feel like Keith and we talk about like a food system and like visioning this and that, and like those are all beautiful and amazing things. But everyone was like, I just want to go shop for food somewhere. Like, what happened? I just need to get some food. So sometimes they make things a little more complicated than what perhaps the majority of folks are interested in.
Lizzie and I have had a lot of figures. If it were to me, I will put a grocery in my closet in front of me. Like everybody, like, I don't care.
That happens, you know, because you want to move things forward, but then also I'm like super practical, and I'm like, oh, like, you know, also we just want to get some things done. And I think, you know, a little bit of it is like building that trust, like, you know, working as someone, I'll just speak from, not for the co-op, but from like working for the city. I think there's a lot of broken trust in many ways, a lot of times with people who are like, well, I said something to the city and you didn't do this and you didn't do that. And it goes back to this idea of transparent communication, because now that I work for the municipality, I see why things don't happen sometimes. But it still doesn't help my case when I am trying to get people engaged and give me input, and they're like, well, why would I show up? Because you didn't do X, Y, and Z. And so I think that is something that's really important to think about and rebuild. Amen.
I really like what Christian just said, and a lot of people, what they said. I mean, I'm kind of looking at it, and I've been a member, I think, for 4 years now. I think it's somewhat of a marketing thing too. I'm excited about, in a sense, the opportunity here. It's like, it's a chance to kind of rejigger this, you know? Mm-hmm. I mean, and I think the correspondences have been good, but maybe there's a way to kind of market this as a real new opportunity. You know, I think there's a level of humbleness, but I would even increase the level of humbleness, you know, about the last 5 years. And I think if it's, you know, if we get the word out, some of the strategies that we mentioned, but remarket as a new opportunity and to really focus in on the real decision making that has to happen. I go back to the decentralization, centralization. I think that's just such a key thing. You know, is that one store? I mean, and have a dialogue and Kristen's comment. You know, what do you want from this? You know, going back to the basics as well. You know, I think becomes the. So.
I just want to add to this because I did want to acknowledge what you said earlier, Jenny. I think you hit the nail on the head about really not approaching it the same way that it was approached in the past, and like learning from the mistakes that, or all the lessons that we've learned through this process. And I think that's really important. I think that's something that maybe was left out, or maybe we didn't get to directly through the focus groups, but like, yeah, and I've said this to the council, I don't think that we should approach it the same way that we did as far as putting all our eggs in one basket in a site and then pouring, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars into it. I don't think that's a road that we should or will go down again. And also, Kristen, to your point of, and kind of everyone, like having a place that, you know, serves or fills that need for groceries and affordable groceries at that. And I love that you brought up the nonprofit grocery, because that was something that I brought to the team. And I was like, guys, like there's a way that, you know, people are doing this in communities, and it blew my mind. So that's something that I was researching a lot, and really just want to find something that is gonna accomplish and fill the need for affordable and local food, and doing it in a way that serves the community. And also, one thing I did want to say about the truck thing is that, like, and kind of what like you guys were both bringing points back and forth, like I think our community, like we need to be able to have a lot of options, and like our community, not everybody grows up on eating the food that is made locally, right? Like there's a large Hispanic community, there's a large very diverse community, and so we want to make sure that this store is able to fill a need for all of those people, and not everything is produced locally. And so, yeah, I just want to say that I think that truck loading thing, wherever we decide to do, we don't want to cut ourselves off from being able to receive things that large part of our community might want, because it's not produced locally. And so, yeah, I feel like I had a bunch of things that all of you guys said that I wanted to connect, but I did just want to, I guess, drive home that I don't think that we should approach it in this new iteration the same way that we did before. That, I'm all for starting small and just having a place that focuses on food. And then, we get really good at that. We make it profitable or we make it sustainable and then we build from there. But I really don't want to overpromise and underdeliver again. And to your point, Michael, like a level of humility and a little bit of, a bit of an apology to our members and community, because I just want to acknowledge that it was disappointing and that I think we did like over promise and definitely under deliver, and a lot of things, as you guys learned in this presentation or this meeting, led up to that. But we're at a place where we can start over.
Oh, hey. I'm sorry that I had to leave, y'all. My little one has a birthday party coming up in an hour or less. But I've been listening, and all of you have been speaking really important truths that have to be acknowledged. And I like to just lift up the solidarity economy as a whole. I might be a little biased because I am in a worker-owned cooperative. And I was slightly surprised when I'm a fairly new resident to Kingston, was fairly surprised that there weren't really any worker co-ops, or that even there was much understanding around worker co-ops, yet there was a food co-op being opened or in the process of being developed. And not being an expert necessarily, but having studied the economy and really closely this what is a new labor movement that folks don't really understand, to be honest with you. And we are seeing in Kingston, like the cleaning co-op, how it can be used in different ways to address not only economic opportunities, but these are people that some of them don't have status, don't know English, yet they're able to be owners of their own business. It is my opinion solely that anyone working on a food co-op should have much, much more understanding of the full solidarity economy as it is being developed, because when the food co-op started to be developed in Kingston, the solidarity economy wasn't as mature as it is now, with so many financing options specifically for worker co-ops, for cooperatives. I mean, just in the last few years, there's all these new funds that have opened for that. And I would argue that the city of Kingston does not know enough about the solidarity economy and the different aspects of it, and how a food co-op is connected to that solidarity economy, right? Which is really interesting. I made an observation that folks at the Kingston Land Trust don't know anything about worker cooperatives. And that's not the first land trust that I've come across that doesn't know anything about worker cooperatives, but land trusts are such a pivotal aspect of the solidarity economy, and built in to the solidarity economy is community engagement. You can't get around it. You can't get around community engagement. And so what I'm here to put forward is that lived experience as a practitioner of cooperation for workers, and also as a systems change advocate, because this food co-op won't work as well, in my opinion only, if the rest of the institutions that are part of the solidarity economy aren't in Kingston as well. Right. So right now our funder is NoVo, but we need a people's bank to fund our co-op's expansion. We don't need NoVo's money. We need the people's money. And that's part of creating a community CDFI, Community Development Fund. Anyway, long-winded, but uplifting the solidarity economy as the real driver here and not capitalism. So it is really hard work to shift that because people don't quite understand the alternative until they practice it. If you read about it, that's half the battle. You got to practice it. And that's the real juice. That's the real money right there. You know what I mean? And so that's what I'm hoping to do moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just like kind of add on to that? I agree 100%. Oh, really?
Yeah.
I agree 100%. I think that that's the ultimate vision. And I think that's what a lot of us are feeling in various, having various visions about that. And I personally believe that my personal approach to that is to start by taking a good look at what we have right now and being engaged with that, and also taking a good look at the vision and being engaged with that. And you kind of can't jump out of where we are now into the vision immediately, but I think you can build vision to the vision. So it's like, I think it's kind of both. It's like maybe we have to start and meet people where they're at and what they're used to, and then push that sphere or boundary, not to the point of feeling disassociated or feeling isolated or cut out of the vision, but push the sphere and the boundary enough toward it that people can continue to live their lives and engage, and also try some new things and try to build that alternative so that new stone can gather some moss. So I think maybe that's the way I approach it.
Well, I did feel very stimulated by the conversation, and I just had the thought I would be so sad if the food co-op voted.
If a food co-op sold it, voted,
Folded. It didn't happen.
Yeah.
I mean, the obstacles seem pretty intense, but we just had a very optimistic statement from Joel about there is a movement towards much more cooperative and already used. But why did we help the food co-op jump onto this new wave of envisaging money, re-envisaging money? And I think I don't know how you do it. But I think if you were engaging the community, one of the classic things is that you feed people, and you have great food here, about half of which is being eaten. Why are you smiling at each other?
No, it's just sweet.
Yeah.
It's very sweet.
And we share a lot of the same sentiments. So like, we both are very passionate about just feed people, just get out there and feed people. And so when you say something like that, it's sweet because we feel seen in that moment. Yeah. We feel seen.
I am a white privileged woman, and I want to apologize if I gave any kind of impression of overriding a single working mother with children and the difficulties they face. And any other people of color who just only have to hear my accent and they think she's a white privileged woman. So I know I have to be careful about my language sometimes. But and yes, I was wondering, is there anything like we could keep the nourishment boxes going? They seem to be the best.
We're looking at each other
here. Why do we really? That's the real small stuff.
Right.
It's cute and it's sweet, and I don't know what the buying option is, but explore that. But what about partnering with the existing food people? Mm-hmm. What about partnering with the Kingston meat market down there on Broadway? What even about partnering with Hazards so that their food can be donated? What about are you thinking about all the connections with all the food suppliers so that you don't have to be recreating the wheel for yourself? Yeah. I mean, even if it isn't exactly what you want, it's food there for people. I think until we really start showing that the food is there for people to come and buy, whether it meets all their needs or not, we can't do it. You can't start by only starting if you can complete every single piece of your work. Right. Agree. So I've just gone through a very instructive process with the community fund. I was one of the 18 people involved. Boy, what an instructive process with a steep learning curve. And you are with the good work, and so I'm sure they can be advisors, do consultancy, but they did manage to reach the community about their forming community. They did a pretty good job, and I know it was a lot of work. So I don't know if you have enough people with you. I mean, if your council is done, that's number one. If you feel that you don't want to be illegal, right? I'm so sorry. I'm so
No,
sorry.
this is like everything you're saying are like the things that we've been aiming to not only thinking but like aiming to center. In there are so many, I think, in every single setting that at least I've sat in, because like my personal beliefs, and again, I will start a grocery store in my closet. Let's jump out, let's get it going, and let's do it. And I think it sometimes becomes challenging and kind of like hard because we have people we've gotten very lucky with the people in this room who are very passionate about, hey, let's start small, let's get something open, let's not think too much about it. And then there are folks who could care less about the organizing, could care less about starting small or something, and really bought into that bigger vision, right? And so even this, like even in the nourishment boxes, we received a lot of feedback from people saying, I want my membership back. When is the store going to open? I don't care about this. Something like, without people, because like another thing that's challenging, the big takeaway that I heard from this too was, 2 hours a week.
It's too much.
It's too much. And we have, to me, it requires about, 2 hours of engagement just on your computer, from the communications we give to the social medias to the member meetings, which are once a month. And without people coming to talk and having these conversations with us, and simply emailing us, your thoughts or responding to questions that we ask, it's hard to know if a lot of the membership feels like we're feeling, hey, get something open, get something going, we don't care, or if it is the other way, because just for I'm sure for every one member who feels one way, there's another who feels another, and we play that balancing act of. Some people, have very strong opinions about a solidarity economy, very strong opinions about the relationship between a local economy and a global economy. And where you fall on that spectrum determines how the store looks. And so many people fall so differently.
Really, the members are the engine of this thing.
Thank you all so much for joining us and engaging. And this is what we've been needing. And we hope that you'll stay engaged and informed and get involved and encourage other people to get involved, because really that is what we're lacking right now, is that community and that passion for doing this work. So thank you all for showing up and showing out.
Thank you.